This episode of the EdTech Startup Show is brought to you by EduHustles. That's www.eduhustles.com. EduHustles is a place where teachers can go to find out about part-time education-related side hustles that they can do using their existing skills and experience. And over my about 10 years of teaching, I've done every education-related side hustle from running a club to tutoring to working for an online teaching company to doing consulting, blogging, freelancing. And I realized that lots of other teachers were looking for these same kinds of opportunities and also looking to learn about how to get started with this stuff. So if you are an educator, an administrator even, or just curious to see what it's all about, go to www.eduhustles.com, drop your email in there, and introduce yourself when you get the message from me. Also, if you're an education company and you want to talk to me about hiring teachers for education-related part-time jobs, you can reach out to me at gerard@gerarddawson.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by the 5-Day Copy Fix. I've been a teacher for about 10 years, as I've mentioned, and I've helped, fortunately, some of the bigger K-12 edtech companies in America fix their website, emails, content, case studies, etc. by doing one thing, and that's improving the copy. After thinking about what I've learned, mistakes I've made, different techniques and tactics and strategies I've tried, I put it all together for you. And for you, I'm talking about folks working in marketing or founders of education companies or edtech startups, or even a solo education consultant. And I put it together for you in a short 5-day free email course, which, like I mentioned, is called the 5-Day Copy Fix. Now, it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to magically transform your business. However, if you read the 5 lessons, think carefully about how they apply to your specific business situation, and most importantly, apply the ideas, I think you'll see some surprising improvements. So if you were curious to see what it's all about, go to gerarddawson.com, and right on the front page there, you'll see a form to drop in your email and get lesson 1. So put in your email, hit the big button, and once you get that first lesson, please hit reply, introduce yourself, and let me know what you think. You're listening to the EdTech Startup Show, and I'm your host, Gerard Dawson. Tonight I'm talking to Bryanne Leeming, who is the founder and CEO of Unruly Studios. Hey Bryanne, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. So Unruly Studios is a cool company, and I've been interested in what you're doing for a while now, just because, in my opinion, the idea is kind of a unique approach to what the area of education that you're addressing, and it's just really fun, again, unique idea. So for folks who aren't aware, can you just tell a little bit about what you're doing at Unruly, and in particular what your role is as founder and CEO?
Absolutely. So what we do at Unruly Studios is we combine STEM learning with active recess style play for students in elementary and middle school. And so those two things are not always kind of put in the same category, but how we do it, our first product is called Unruly Splats, and they are electronic programmable floor buttons that light up, make sound, and they sense when they're stomped on. So students actually run around and jump on flats to play active games, like things like relay races or capture the flag or whack-a-mole or these types of larger gameplay that you might see at recess or in PE class. And through Bluetooth, they're connected to a tablet or a Chromebook, and students can use a block coding language, which is we based on MIT's Scratch programming language. And so we have a similar kind of block programming, drag and drop, and kids create their own games on that app for active play. So for the first time ever, they're creating these games where they're actually creating relay races and timers and competitive games and collaborative games. And so super fun way to engage kids in the elementary and middle school with learning coding for the first time. So that's what we do. And I'm the founder and CEO and started the company a couple of years ago out of the Babson MBA program. And I guess you had asked about my role as a founder and CEO. I feel like at the early days, you're doing everything. And now we're at about a 9-person team right now. So it's starting to get really exciting, focused on selling and working directly with schools. And the way that we work with schools is a little different as well. I guess the way from our name, Unruly, we tend to try to do things a little differently. And we actually do full school partnerships. So we do an annual plan with schools as a membership. And so instead of just kind of like dropping off splats and saying see you later, we actually sell these splats in this plan because it comes with a full warranty because students are stomping on them. We replace them if any of them break, but they rarely do. And then we also it comes with full support. So we actually train teachers a lot of times it's their first time learning to code when they're using splats and they're expected to go teach coding. So we actually do ongoing coaching and training throughout the year with this plan, and lots of engagement with the community is included, as well as we share usage data of how many times your school stomped on splats that month or that year and things like that. So it's kind of all bundled in together for the schools. And so that's how we do it. And yeah, that's us.
Yeah. And for me, after watching you have some good videos on the website of basically kids using the splats. And I think if you're listening and if you haven't seen what it looks like, I definitely encourage you to go watch the videos so you can see just how the coding and the playing and collaboration, how it looks. Because I think an awesome thing about any product that can be kind of demonstrated to me has an advantage. And it just has a really cool, you can kind of see the impact right away. And it did get me thinking, as I was watching the videos, I was like, if I worked for a company that made this, I'd have to be testing it out all the time at work. So I was wondering, before you might be working from home, how often are the splats being used in the office, and who's the best on your team?
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah, I mean, we work in a big co-working space called GSV Labs in Boston. That's where our headquarters are. And yeah, we definitely quite often will have them out and about testing out games for our lesson plans or things like that. We've had kids in the office before for some of our beta testing, and yeah, it's always a good time. So yes, it is tempting, and they make noise. So they have about 80 sounds in them, which we tried to make some pretty fun, silly sounds for kids. And yeah, so they get a lot of use at the office for sure. We kind of joked we're making a splat into our sales bell from now on. And so you can hit the splat and make a buzz sound every time we get a sale or stuff like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And as we're getting into that, so we have the name splats, there's movement, there's fun. You're talking about sounds. And as I see a lot of, as a teacher and just from talking to folks like you, I see a lot of companies' websites and their overall approach. And lots of times it is a little bit more dry and kind of academic. And you go onto your website and you hear you talk about the product and you see it happening, and it clearly has a different feel to it. So I'm wondering if you, how you thought about kind of creating the general Unruly brand and how you kind of design this fun experience around your company and your product.
Oh yeah. So where the Unruly brand came from and things, I mean, it's all about for us is just kind of bending the rules, and that's why it's called Unruly, because in making code and coding new games, you're also creating rules for games. And we kind of translate that to how kids make rules on the playground or at recess. Like they're always making up rules for tag or make it into freeze tag or TV tag or other variations on rules. And so we kind of tried to play it up with Unruly, and a lot of the inspiration on the branding, and I can't take all the credit. I have Paul Zidano as our chief creative officer. He has been amazing and does all of our branding. And he kind of pulls a lot from like skateboarding culture, actually, because there with skateboarding, and I'm actually a snowboarder myself, but like there's a lot of sort of you kind of are creative with your environment. And there's a lot of kind of skateboarding videos, for instance, where they're making a ramp out of random pieces of the city or wherever they are. And that's kind of what we do with Splats is you're creating an experience, you're creating your environment, you're creating rules for your environment. And so we do sort of take some inspiration from that culture as well. And that's something we talk about a lot. But yeah, there's a lot with being unruly is about being resilient. And as a teacher, it's kind of becoming the coach versus fully, it's not a lecture type of product. Like you're a coach, you're kind of learning with your students, because a lot of times, let's say we're working with a PE teacher or a PE class, it might be their first time ever coding. But we try to make it as approachable as possible. We make it really fun, silly. It's okay to make mistakes. And that's kind of where the branding comes from. We wanted to stand out in the education space for sure.
Yeah, it definitely achieves that. And you're talking about something I was really curious to ask you about, because you said, for example, it'll be used in a PE class, or not necessarily just a computer class, for example, or a traditional kind of learning to code environment. So I guess two parts to what I'm wondering is, one, where do you see kind of the general, if you had to kind of generalize the level of comfort that teachers have with teaching coding or using a product like the Splats that have coding built in? And then, because I know it's not everybody on board yet, like it's growing, but it's not everybody on board yet. How do you kind of try to overcome maybe that objection or support teachers in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a full range, I would say. I mean, I meet teachers who are complete expert coders, like they could build, they're complete experts. I meet teachers who have never done it in their life, but they're being asked to do it, or they're excited to try it. And so all that range. And I think like more and more schools are being mandated to teach computer science at the K through 12 level. And more it's kind of going even younger. So at elementary school levels, they are by the state told they need to at least incorporate coding in some way. And usually there's no one at the school who's trained to do that yet. So we're really embracing that at Unruly. And that came about. That's why we launched the Unruly membership plans, really, is because we interviewed over 100 principals last summer around the country. And we learned that one of the biggest things that happens when they buy a new ed tech tool, specifically a hardware tool for their school, like robotics or things like that, is that it doesn't get used so it sits in the closet and gathers dust because there's no one trained to use it over time. And it's not about the one-off training, it's about ongoing support over time and kind of thinking of how do I help you incorporate this into your curriculum, into what you're already doing. So we do a lot of that. Like a lot of times teachers come to us and they're like, I am doing a unit on football in PE and I want to try to incorporate the Splats. What are ideas for how I could do that? And we are working directly with them on like, oh, this is a great game you could use. Or we've had teachers come to us like, I'm trying to build this musical chairs game. Can you help me? And like, we'll kind of go back and forth. So it's very much like a pretty hands-on collaboration from the time we start. And it could be anyone at the school. It's a full school tool. So the way we work with schools is it's not like you pay for a seat license or something like that. You actually can transition it to all different classes throughout the day. So it could start in PE in the morning and then get worked on in tech class later or in the library. And it kind of moves around the school. So we try to make that really easy too. And often we're working with more than one teacher at the school to get it off the ground and get the groundswell going for Splats.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, that seems to make sense from an education perspective from the school, and then also from that's kind of a cool kind of marketing and selling point for you too. I'm wondering, and it's okay if not one specifically comes to mind, but you mentioned a couple cool use cases already, like playing football in PE or using it in the library. In the time that your company's been around so far, can you think of an example where you really heard of a use case from a school or something unique, that a unique way that the splats were being used, where it really struck you as like, oh, this is kind of the vision that we're hoping for. This is the impact we're hoping to have.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's really one of my favorite things is seeing, let's say we see a tweet of someone tweets a video and it's something we never expected splats to be used for. And it's the best thing. So one thing that happened recently is there was a school, they were doing a game, just a game design activity with splats. So they had the kids all creating their own games. And one kid took kind of our version of whack-a-mole, which is the classic arcade game. But they decided, it was in the fall and it was around Halloween, and they decided to do a bobbing for apples game. So instead of what usually splats are, you're jumping on them with your feet, but this kid had done it, and all his classmates are there using their heads to bob for apples, like by hitting the red splat when it lit up, stuff like that. So that was like something I never thought splats would be used for, but bobbing for apples had games. We had a librarian was using it with her younger students, really in the kindergarten and first grade level. They were reading a storybook, but they were using it for a sound effect as part of the story. So kind of interactive storytelling. And that we had never thought of. And the PEs, they were learning how to catch and throw football. And I would never have thought this would fit into that. But he ended up using a relay race game. And instead of just kind of standing across the room to pass the football, the kids were doing the relay race and then passing the football and kind of going back and forth there. So lots of cool things that I would never have expected. Jeopardy buzzers, people are using them as Jeopardy buzzers for like a debate or like a quiz bowl style lessons in social studies, stuff like that, all kinds of stuff. I love seeing on Twitter, especially, that's where a lot of the games get shared by teachers. I mean, that's been amazing to see the community kind of form around it.
Yeah, those are cool examples, and it's kind of bringing to mind something I wanted to ask you about, which is that your company is not just, at least as far as I see it, there are some ed tech products, and these serve a useful and important purpose where they're taking something that already existed and kind of just applying technology to make it more efficient or more convenient. So this happens with curriculum content or with student information systems and things like this. And that's a necessary part of education too. But with your company, it's a very intentionally designed and created product and approach to learning that's kind of, in my opinion, like a step forward and a new approach. So your dog agrees with me, I guess there. But
I was wondering if you heard that.
So basically, I want to ask about kind of your philosophy around learning and education. If you have any kind of influences or sources that you kind of drew from when coming up with your product and your company.
Yes, I was pausing for the dog to finish working. Oh. She's good now. I mean, yeah, I think my original inspiration for starting Unruly came from my own experience. Actually, when I was 8 years old, I went to a public school in New Hampshire where I grew up, and I was exposed to coding in that class, in a computer class. And I didn't really realize at the time that I was learning coding. It was a game. It was called Micro Worlds that I was learning. And 10 years later, I took computer science at McGill University, and I was learning the Lisp programming language. And I was like, I've already done this before. What was that game that I was playing when I was 8? And it all came back to me, and I remembered more the concepts than anything else and the basic logic of it all. And that helped me in that class, and later brought me into the tech world. I worked in tech in New York City, and then initially kind of sparked the idea for this company was, how do we make learning coding at that age more engaging, more social, more group collaboration, kind of more physically active, like kind of more like a sport. So that was initially where the idea came from. But early on in developing SPLATs, I met Dr. Aman Milner, who is a professor at Olin College of Engineering. I was at Babson, which is right next door, so I kind of walked over and showed him a prototype I was working on. And since that point, we've been working together. He's the founding advisor, and he comes from the MIT Media Lab, from the Scratch team, who put out the Scratch programming language, and comes from a long line of what's called constructionism. So that's definitely in line with our philosophy at Unruly, is constructionism, learning by doing, the experiential learning, and learning through that experience of building something or making something. And so with that comes like the maker movement. We initially prototyped at a lot of maker fairs, and along the way, we ended up bringing on an employee, Sean Wallace, who came from that as well. He had written a lot of books with Make about Arduino and Raspberry Pi and those types of tools. And so that's very much in line with our way of thinking. And I think the other place that I love reading, like studies around play and the importance of play at young ages and why. And I've always found really good ones from the Boston Children's Museum and the research that they do. So we had done some early prototyping there and had been there and collaborating. And so really, those are the types of things that we definitely look for, is the learning through play, learning by doing. That's our philosophy at Unruly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that anybody who's been around kids learning, especially younger kids, kind of knows that inherently. I feel like kind of as trends shift in education, fortunately, I see this kind of project-based learning through play, fortunately kind of coming back as we maybe the pendulum swings back from maybe in my opinion, too much of a focus on standards and testing and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
if you take this approach, just kind of something I'm curious about now, you're applying it to help kids learn coding, and then with that is like logical thinking, problem solving. If there was another part of education that you would kind of like to inject more of this learning through playing with, does anything come to mind? Anything where you feel like another area where you wish you could kind of apply the Unruly philosophy to it?
I think it can be applied to almost any piece of education, the experiential learning and just sort of having a motivation to push through something and be resilient. So the way we designed SPLATs is they're super simple. If you notice, like it's really just, there's no wires. You don't have to put it together. It's a giant button and it goes on and off, and then it lights up and you can kind of play with a timer or a scoreboard on the app. And with those small inputs, kids get so creative because of the constraint. I think is like how we designed it. Is it's simple, but with that, and then with sort of the inspiration of kids already know the rules to all the games they're going to build. They know how to make a relay race. They know what they want their tag game to work like. They know the rules already, and that gives them the motivation, and then they can push through that to develop for it. So I think developing for an audience is part of it too. It's a very social way to play. And so kids are learning from both building the game, but then testing it out in the real world. Having a whole class of 30 students play their game gives them all the kind of live feedback that they're going to see. And that's how we think about it, is the way that currently technology is built later on, like when kids, are later grow up and end up working in these companies. The way it's built is you're on a team, and the technology team is working with the business team and finding out the needs, and then you're testing it and you're seeing what it looks like in the real world. And we've tried to kind of recreate that with SPLATs, but I think that can be applied to so many different things for kids, of ways of learning. Is if you think even about building a company, it's the same process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many kids who kind of the traditional learning environment of sitting still just doesn't allow them to really use their intelligence, and actually kind of causes them to be act out or be labeled incorrectly. So I think it's actually a huge step forward to give kids this active approach to learning. And yeah, I definitely agree with you about it being broadly applicable across education.
We always say it's good to have a buzz in the room when you're doing splats, because it means there's learning happening. So kind of hearing that buzz and kids, the rowdiness almost is a good thing. When you've put together your classroom and you've really set it up for that structure. So you've got the coding time, but you also have the playing time, and it can be okay that it's a little bit louder. And we have lots of teachers who agree with us. We just had a librarian who has a section of her library called the no shushing zone, and that's like where they do splats and like stuff like that. So there are times for it during the day, and the teachers who are really successful with splats can kind of structure their classroom so that they have that play can happen in a really effective way, and then it can go straight back to work if they need to. It's not out of control, but it's like what it should be, this little buzz in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that, even, not to try to create a pun, but even the kids that teachers might occasionally think are a little bit unruly could probably benefit the most from, this type of activity. Just thinking back to even like my own experience in school, hating to kind of sit still, but loving to solve problems and move around and work with friends. But so diving into a little bit the education, your education approach, switching gears to an extent, there's a few cool facts about you and about the earlier stages of the company that I wanted to just kind of throw out there and get a little bit of your reaction on, and maybe some lessons learned. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So one was that I saw in an article as I was researching for our call, that you grew up with business owning parents that owned a restaurant in New Hampshire. And so, did I get that right?
Yes, they
So,
do. They own Murphy's on the Green in Hanover, New Hampshire.
cool. Okay. Yeah, I love the Portsmouth, New Hampshire area. One of my favorite
Oh, yeah.
places in the country. Yeah. So I'm wondering maybe what you think, growing up with parents owning a restaurant, was how that kind of may have impacted your current career path in the running a startup, and just curious about any specific memories that perhaps stand out from growing up that way.
Absolutely, it's impacted my journey getting to this point. So I think one thing that it taught me a lot was about commitment, and what it takes to start your own business and run your own business is that it's a 24/7 commitment for a lot of years to get it going, and that it always, you have to be able to prioritize it and really focus on it, and that's something that I definitely learned from watching my parents run the restaurant for so long, and through everything, through all kinds of things, including what's going on right now, of course. So the resilience that they've shown, and like their ability to take the risk and do that. So Murphy's has been around for, it's about 30, more than 30 years now. So it has been, for a restaurant, that's a really long time. So seeing the resilience that they've put into that and how it's grown there. I think the other thing that happens when you grow up around in a family that owns a business is that you see the cause and effect of changes that you make to the business and what the effect is for customers and things like that. So even small things like changing the menu and, introducing this new menu or things like that you would see, and then all of a sudden it would be this huge change in the business. And I feel like seeing that and realizing how much it could affect even just the way that small things, maybe you change the name or just things about it that I remember kind of watching, and you see consumer trends change over time, like from the time when I was very little to now, like consumers cared a lot more about healthier or locally sourced food and things like that. And that's sort of what a restaurant responds to. So I feel like seeing that as you go through the history really prepares you for a startup. It made me really interested in starting my own business, and that's what brought me to Babson initially. And I didn't think I would start a business right away, but I had the idea while I was there, started prototyping it, and then it became what it is. And so I thought at some point I couldn't turn around. So yeah, I think you learn a lot for sure. And restaurants, for instance, I do think there's some similarities that you wouldn't see it at first, but I think between Unruly and the restaurant that my parents have made is it's a very social place. It's a place for gathering, for community, and that's very much what we've done splats in some way. Like, it is meant to be a very social product. Like, it is meant for multiple kids to play at once. It's not one-on-one with a computer. We don't think that's the best way for kids to learn these skills. So I don't know. So in some ways there's some similarities, but mostly it's around watching what my parents did from the background.
Yeah, that's cool. And 30 years running any business is impressive, and certainly a restaurant. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
my respect to them. Did you ever work there?
Oh yeah, for so long, probably 10 years every summer, and throughout when I was in high school, I would work even during the week. So yes, for a long time. I learned a lot from that too. I feel like everyone should at least work in a restaurant for some part of their career. I think you learn a lot about business, but about people and sales, everything.
Yeah, definitely agree. So fast forward a little bit, another just cool thing I noticed in your business journey is that you did a Kickstarter campaign. So you, as far as I saw, you exceeded your goal, and this was, I guess it was about two years ago. So Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general, I feel like is a little bit mysterious to people. Like some people think they just have an idea and throw it up there and see what happens. But I know that people that are successful have a very intentional approach and maybe had some good timing and otherwise maybe didn't just throw up an idea. So basically, I'm curious, what did you learn from doing a Kickstarter?
Yeah, I mean, we put up the Kickstarter. Yeah, we did launch our Kickstarter in 2017, and we delivered it a year later. We had promised delivery for our customers a year later. We delivered on time, which I was so proud of, because so many crowdfunding can tend to be a little late in delivery and everything. So that was one of our goals going in. But I think one thing that I take away from it is knowing what your goal is going in is really important. For us, part of it was the early market demand and sort of proving that out. We had prototyped a lot. We knew how much it would take to make, but we wanted to make sure there was a market there, and we wanted to build our early community. And so we did that successfully. We had over $40,000 raised, and those were all pre-orders of the product who ordered a year in advance. And it also helped us raise our pre-seed round by seeing that traction in the market as well. So that was one of the goals as well, with just sort of market demand validation. And then I would say another thing, it's 30 days. That's how long we did our campaign for. I would not recommend going further than that and longer than that, but it's like the longest 30 days ever, because you have to keep the momentum through the whole thing. And so really planning it out beforehand is so important. Yeah, we had I think we had our page live a month or two before we even launched it, and we were getting feedback and we were showing customers, and not even that, but we had been building our email list for a full year before that. With every maker fair we went to and every event we went to, we were just collecting emails. We were telling people what we were up to and that we were planning to launch something. We were planning to launch a Kickstarter, and if they wanted to stay in touch. And that's the early community we built through kind of the early iterations of the product that ended up backing the campaign and continue to be our customers today. So it's not an overnight thing by any means. Don't just turn it on and expect people to find you. You gotta build that momentum yourself and start to build a community in advance, for sure. Oh, yeah. And don't get married in the middle of no, I'm kidding. My wedding was in the middle of our 30 days, which was amazing, but it was an extra. There was a lot going on at that point. It was an exciting time in my life, for sure.
Wow. Yeah. So you were like walk at the wedding, maybe sneaking a peek at your phone and seeing if you have. No, just kidding. But
no, it's true. By that point, we had actually made it to the goal, but it was a crazy time.
Yeah, that is a lot. And you mentioned one thing that stuck out to me there, which is you specifically noted that you had been building an email list and a community of educators for, I guess you said, a year in advance. And that really stuck out to me, because often I've talked to folks who have an idea or have a early stage company, and then they have their version 1.0 and then basically said, okay, now we're going to do PR, or now we're going to do marketing. And it's kind of like I kind of use the visual analogy of like trying to start, you just compiled this big heavy rock or something, and now you're going to try to push it as opposed to getting a lot of momentum and then let the kind of
Mm.
the snowball grow. So if you could, even if it sounds like oddly specific, what was your approach when you were at events? What did you have to show educators? What would you say to them, and how were you keeping in touch in the early days of the company?
Oh, sure. In the early days, so while I was at school even, I was developing the first prototype, and we started to take it out that summer after I graduated to different, we went to some YMCA summer camps, but then we started going to larger events like the Maker Faire. We went to New York City Maker Faire, which is a huge event. And at those events, it was really about showing what we were in the middle of building and showing where we were planning to go. So we had usually we'd bring like one or two prototypes. We did 24 iterations of our prototype total before we launched the product and went to manufacturing and everything like that. So we were really testing always something different. Some of the prototypes we were testing the gameplay. Some of it we were testing more the software. Some of it was more this is what it might look like, but it actually doesn't function. So we just try to do all these kinds of things. And we did a lot of we would survey customers at the events, or just mostly just have conversations with them, with the people who would eventually become our users, and show them what we were up to and let them try, and obviously let them play a few games. That was our piece. And then just listen and observe, especially too, is we'd always have one person there just kind of watching and see if you notice anything interesting about what's going on. And so using it that way, but then we were always collecting information because people would get really excited about what was coming, and that they were seeing it so early in the journey before we'd even gone to Kickstarter, before it even looked like a product. Our early versions had wires everywhere, and they were not Bluetooth. They had a long USB cable connecting it to a computer, everything. So they were excited to be part of that and give us feedback. And then I tried to collect all the emails, and then would try to email and sometimes it was every month, but often it was more like every quarter. We try to send an email to that list and just keep the community informed about what we were doing, what our next steps were. And that's something I continue to do with the people that I meet who are interested in Unruly. So we have an email list going, and I do it with people who are interested in investing as well. And I just keep people up to date and take them along for the journey. And that's been what's worked really well for us, because every now and then we need help on something, or we have a certain challenge, and we can just always reach out to that community, and we almost always get an answer really quickly, or an introduction, or they like to share in the journey, and always sharing them, both our successes but also our challenges, because that's what's the most helpful to talk with that community about.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. It's like everything in business is easier when one, when you are listening, and two, when you have an audience, which those sound kind of in opposition, but they're very aligned in my perspective. You mentioned another cool thing, which I wanted to ask you, which was I noticed that I guess at the time of the article that I read came out, it was 18 iterations, but you mentioned now 24 iterations of your product. And you're talking about observing educators and basically seeing what they do or how they react. So I'm curious if you can remember at any time where there was you had an assumption or a design choice or a feature that once you kind of saw it out in the wild, a reaction showed you that the opposite or something different was true. So basically I'm always curious about moments where you kind of made realizations about a
Yeah.
feature or about the product.
Oh, yes. It is so important with prototypes that you bring out not to get too attached, because you'll find out when you start seeing users on it what is completely wrong with it and what you need to change very quickly. So one of our prototypes that we really brought around to hundreds of kids, it was made of metal, which we knew was not going to be the final prototype, but the middle was black, and it looked like a screen, it almost looked like an iPad with like a silver around the outside, and the screen was black. And then when you plugged it in, it would light up, and it was really vibrant lights and stuff. But what was interesting is that when we had educators and teachers there, they thought it kind of looks like an iPad on the ground, and we were having kids step on it and stomp on it. And these kids were basically learning that it was okay to step on the iPad or something like that. And so we didn't realize that until we took it out, and they were like, I don't want my kids learning that because I don't want them to step on the actual iPad and think that that's okay. So it was pretty funny, but it showed us something about the color and the way it looked that we needed to fix. So that's why now the slats are blue and white, and they don't look like a screen at all. And we're definitely not training kids to stomp on technology like that.
Yeah, that's funny. You could just imagine the salacious news reports of like students. I don't want to even imagine anything bad, but it's cool that you made that change. So you were mentioning to me earlier about a cool new partnership, and ed tech startup founders and folks in the education industry are always curious about state partnerships or large district partnerships or other those big partnerships that get your product into a lot of hands and make a big impact. So can you tell me a little bit about that story?
Yeah, so we just started working with the province of Nova Scotia directly with their Department of Education, and they came to us. It was initially someone who worked there was working with a bunch of different schools at integrating technology, and he was using splats. He had bought 4 splats, I think, right after the Kickstarter, and he loved them. And we ended up talking with him later and decided he wanted to bring it in as a tool for 25 schools to start in Nova Scotia and really grow out the program there and get all the teachers using it. And it's been an excellent partnership so far. I mean, they're really spread out in the province, so we're able to do lots more like online and work with them online. And yeah, it's been excellent and just getting started, really. There's so much more we're going to do, and a few of them just applied as well we just launched a grant program for during coronavirus while people are home, and so we've had even more exposure within that province through that and through our contact there. So it's really grown from there, but it all started with one educator who was really having a great experience with splats, and him sharing that with other teachers over the summer, and then eventually wanting to make it bigger implementation. So that's been really successful so far. And Nova Scotia has been super far in advance for getting computer science integrated into the school. So they are doing a lot of this with their PE teachers actually as a pilot. So that's exciting too.
Yeah, that is exciting. Kind of reminds me of a few episodes ago, somebody, I think common connection of Kirby Salerno talking about kind of the teacher up to larger partnership approach that can happen when there's teachers or a single advocates for your product, and how it can then spread to a larger scale. We're almost at the end of the time. Do you have a couple more minutes? Do you have to go right at 8:30, or you?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So and then as I just kind of wanted to ask you about these few specific events that just stood out to me as things that were fascinating in terms of perhaps either influencing your business thinking and also just things that have happened along the way. The one other one that I just have a kind of personal interest in is voice technology in education. And as far as I know, I saw you got an investment from the Amazon Alexa Fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, so actually hoping mine doesn't answer me. But so I'm curious just kind of your perspective on, I could see kind of connect the dots for myself a little bit about how voice technology could maybe be integrated into the splats, but I'm just curious of your perspective on voice-enabled devices in the classroom or even for at-home learning, and what you think about that.
Yeah, so we started working with the Alexa Fund. We did the Alexa Accelerator with Techstars, and then they ended up investing in our seed round as well. And for me, voice, I'm a big believer that it's a really great tool for education. And even now you're seeing just how widespread it's becoming in the home. And I do see that as something that's going to eventually reach education, is already starting to in some ways. And my perspective on the voice industry in general, with regard to education, is that I really am excited about the experiences that are being created that really lean into the communal aspect of voice. So the way that where a screen is really one-to-one in many ways, voice is one-to-many. Like voice is meant for communal experiences. And so I'm excited by the things that I'm seeing in the voice space for education that are encouraging and inspiring kids to play with each other versus kids to talk to or just only go one-to-one with the device, right? So that's what I'm really excited about, and it's definitely something that we're thinking ahead about for Unruly. I do think voice is here to stay, and I'm a big fan. And so we're designing some kind of neat things right now, but to come out in the future. But there's a long way to go for education, and I'm excited by the things that really bring out the best, like the community side of the communal side of play.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I mean, just think of we're at my house, we're still in the stage of dancing to Uptown Funk on Alexa a couple times a day, but I can,
yes.
there's glimmers of learning that happen too with asking questions and just the hand, like you're talking about, the hands-free aspect, not staring at the screen, but still getting to tap into like this well of knowledge and data. Yeah, I agree. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting to look at.
Yeah, and in terms of learning, like our company teaches coding, but in terms of teaching coding, you're also kind of, as you're learning how to build new technologies, a lot of times designers now need to think about how is voice integrated into this in the future. And so kids are starting, to think about how to become a voice designer and things like that. And so there's that aspect as well, but it's exciting.
Yeah, so just more opportunities for students to learn basically STEM skills in a new area.
Yep.
That's cool.
Definitely.
So you're hinting at the future of your company a little bit, but specifically, or to whatever extent you might be open to talking about it, what's up next for you and for Unruly?
So we're always cooking up new things, and we've got a new version of our app coming out in time for back to school this year. And so that's got a bunch of new features that our customers have been asking for, and we're excited to be working on with them. So that's going to be a big new step for us. We're always thinking ahead about new products, and those are down the line a bit more, but more we're really building relationships with our schools right now and going into this year. And yeah, lots of exciting things coming on the app.
Mm-hmm. Actually, one thing I didn't ask you about, but I've been asking basically every person who is leading an ed tech company lately is basically what's happening right now for your company with school closures.
Yes. So one thing that we've been able to do a lot of recently is host online sessions, online webinars, training, and just talking about remote learning and remote teaching. And we've had an incredible engagement online lately with our customers and our community around how to teach coding while virtual. And so we've actually put out our own content, splatting without splats. So if all your students obviously won't have splats at home, but there's a lot of things you can do with our app online. So we've been developing lesson plans for that. We just came out with one last week with Morse code, and one the week before with music, MIDI lessons, and so creating music songs and things like that, and with code. And so we're doing a lot of that online content and developing virtual content. But we also decided that while teachers were home, we thought it would be a great opportunity to get them splats at home. So we did our COVID-19 Unruly in the House grant, and we had teachers applied. Applications are over already. We actually chose the winners, but we had over 1,000 applicants, and we chose 500 to receive the 2 packs of splats at home. And so it's a great experience right now because they're all excited to learn splats while they're at home right now, but also teach the virtual lessons to their students and play with their kids who are home as well. So it's been really well received. They're all tweeting about it just this week because they're just receiving them. So it's fun to see what they're starting to build and the games they're playing already while at home and kind of preparing for next year. So we were able to do that really quickly, and it's been really successful so far. And we're psyched to see. We're just happy to be able to bring that into people's homes right now. It's just a little unruliness, and it's just what people need right now is like get the kids moving and get excited for next year and all of that.
So, Bryanne, it's been really cool to hear your reflections on growing your business, and also it's awesome you've been willing to share some of your thought processes and some stories too, which always makes the conversation interesting for me, just to selfishly say that part. But before we go, what's a call to action or kind of a suggestion you have for listeners?
Oh, definitely. I mean, from the Unruly and me, get some exercise while you're home, get your kids moving, and try coding if you want. Our app is available online. You can try that out. But we're also launching a survey this week to principals and educators. So if you're a principal or educator interested in taking the survey, we're going to be sharing the results with everyone who takes it, as well as anyone who reaches out and wants to see those results. We'll be publishing them. But we're really trying to learn a lot right now about where people are at with going back to school next fall and what's going to be different and how they're planning ahead and what their budgets are looking like and things like that, and really just understanding the market and talking to our community. So we are excited to learn more about STEM in this space as well, and in this time with COVID. So yeah, we'll be launching that soon. And if you want to be part of it, you can email info@unruly-studios.com, or you can find our contact info on our website, unrulysplats.com.
All right, very cool. Yeah, it's unrulysplats.com. Like I said, go check it out, and I think you'll find it's a really fun, exciting new approach that I hope continues to grow in popularity in schools. So, Bryanne, just want to thank you again for coming on the show. And until next time, everybody, I'm Gerard Dawson, and thanks for listening to the EdTech Startup Show. Bryanne, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.